Okay, I have removed everything on the website here, and we are going to take a look at VH and VW, which are going to be super awesome. They're going to help us a ton with building responsive websites. So we have a H. Why am I making weird noises? Oh, websites. Okay. So what I have here is just a H2 with a div. I'm actually going to throw this inside a div. So H2 and a P inside a div. Hit save. Sometimes we want to make sure that we want to just have a page here that takes up the whole space of the screen. So you notice that when we add a div here and we add a height of 100%, let's also add a background color to this. So I might add a background of shaded blue. Okay, hit save, and it just takes up the size of the content, right? Because our body is just the size of the content. So there we go. So this doesn't work. So we saw that we can hack that and add a HTML and body and give that a height of 100%. But then again, this is kind of relative to whatever our parent is, which is the body. So if I change this to 50%, then there we go. So rather than doing that, what we can do is we can use something, we can delete everything here. We can use VH. So I'm going to add a height of 100 VH and hit save. And this is going to take up the whole space available here on the screen. So it's the viewport height. And the cool thing is we can also change the size of this like this, and this is going to adapt automatically for us. So even if I add outside of this div a H1 and it's going to say hello, look at that. If I scroll, boom, it's exactly 100. So as soon as I start scrolling, we can start seeing the text. And even if I resize this to something like this, smaller, if I start scrolling, boom, we immediately start to see the text. So that's super, super cool. And this height is going to help us a ton. Now, let me show you something else. If I add, we can also select div H1 here. So I can select the H1 in here. Let's actually increase the font size of everything. So let's just add a font size here of 2.4 rem. Okay, so we can see this a bit easier. Okay, super. So check this out. I can even add a height on this. So height 50 VH. All right, and that should increase it. It's not because I use a H2. So let's do that. As you can see, I can also add a height here. And this is not relative to this 100 VH here. I can use whatever I want. I can do 20, 30, and if I change this to something like 50, as you can see, if I add 50 here, it actually drops out the rest of the content. So it's not dependent on the parent element. Now this kind of breaks our code, unfortunately. What if I want this to also be responsive? So as you can see, as soon as it leaves that parent height, it doesn't really care about it. But what if I want this to be fluid? Just in case we have a ton of content in here and this overflows, all right? So we can also use min height here. So if I add a min dash height, this is gonna adapt automatically. So it's gonna be like, oh, okay, so if your children have bigger heights, it's okay, I'm gonna adapt to it. I'm gonna become larger automatically because I have this min height. So if I add something like 80, as you can see, this div is automatically gonna stretch on its own. So this is very powerful. All we need is min height, and we can create whatever design we want. Okay, there's also another one which is called VW. So I'm gonna get rid of everything here. I'm gonna keep this to, let's keep it like 50, that's fine. If we mess around with width, and I'll add 50%, okay, well, we can see how that works, 80%. But take a look at this. If I grab the H2 again, div H2, and I add a background of light gray to it. Actually, let's make it something brighter. There we go. So you can see that. If I add a width to this, this again is going to be relative to the parent. So it's actually going to be 50% of the size of the parent element, which is this box. Okay, and 100% is actually going to be the size of the whole thing, all right? But it's not going to be the size of the viewport. So we have another property that kind of works the same way as VH, but for width. and that is VW. So as you can see, if I had 100 VW, this actually stretches to the whole available space on the screen. Okay, it doesn't care about the parent. So if I add 50, this is going to be the size of this, but I can mess around freely with this and I don't have to worry about in which container does it belong to. Okay, now the cool thing that we can do with this one is actually create some responsive text. So the way we can do that is, well, we saw that we could do it with media queries, and that's true. So let me remove the width here. All right, and let's change this back. So let's get rid of this as well. Let's get rid of the background colors here like this, and this one as well, just clearing some things up here. Okay, so take a look at this. We can technically do a media, and then we can do a max width of 7, let's do 500 pixels, okay? Like this. And then here, let's also add a background of a light color so we can see this. Background, did we mess something up? Let's see, light blue, because I'm not getting any autocomplete. So let's see here. Okay, so we need to actually add this to the body. So body, like that, okay? So let's see if this works. If we get to a smaller screen, as you can see, it hits. But let's increase the size a bit, 124 pixels, okay? Just so we have a bit more space here. Okay, there we go. Perfect. So now take a look what I can do here. I can just simply grab the HTML and just make that font size a bit smaller. I can do 50%. And that's gonna take care of everything else. Why? Because we added rem units everywhere. If we had this to pixels, then we would have to go on each element and change them, like H2, font size, 24 pixels, and paragraph, 18 pixels. So that's the reason why we used rems, is because we can easily modify this just by setting the HTML font size to something else. So now take a look. As soon as we hit that point, everything is gonna get a bit smaller. So how simple is that? But there's actually another cool technique that we can use. And the cool technique is called calc. What the hell is calc, Ed? So what you can do is you can actually calculate two values. I'm gonna comment this out for now a bit. So let's do this and this. Okay, so this doesn't work anymore. Take a look at this. Rather than putting font size 2.4 rem, what we can do is calculate 2.4 rem plus 0.5 VH, or 1 VW. My apologies, not VH, and hit save. So as you can see, the font gets a bit bigger, but as soon as we start resizing this, this starts getting larger. And if we go down, it starts getting smaller. How this thing basically works is that we have 24 pixels here because we set the rem size to be 1 pixel, 1 rem to be 10 pixels. And what we're doing is we are adding to this. So 24 pixels plus whatever this one viewport width is. So you remember that when we added 100, that took up the whole screen space. Well, if we have a device here that has a viewport width of 360, we can basically divide that by 100, which is going to give us that 1%. So basically here, if we divide this, this would add an additional 3.6 pixels to us. But as soon as we increase the size, well, we might add more. So as soon as we get to an iPad Pro, then you have to divide that and you are going to get 10 pixels by 100, right? So the more you divide, and the bigger the width gets here, the bigger the font also gets, because this will automatically calculate it for you. It's going to add 24 plus, well, let's see, the device size is 1024. So I'm going to split it by 100. Okay, by 100 because we have 1. And that's how it gets increased. So as you can see now, we can keep going and going, and that viewport width is going to change, and it's going to keep adding the pixels more and more. And as soon as we get smaller and smaller, it's going to get smaller. Now you can slow down the process of this, so you can do something like 0.5%, and that's going to make it less dramatic. So when we start increasing, it's not going to increase as fast, but it still scales, right? If you want to do crazy things, you can do 3 here, and then as soon as you start getting bigger, it's going to scale super fast. So you can do something like 0.5 here, which is going to be perfectly fine. There we go. So there we go, and you would scale up and everything works perfectly. We can also limit the sizing if we want. So if I switch back to something like 2 here, right, and I want to change this maybe to something like 1.4 rem, hit save, so it looks good on mobile, but I want to scale this up, but I want to limit this. So what we can do is come back with this media, and I can actually add 2 here, all right? And this is going to look weird a bit, but what we can do is say have a minimum width of 500 pixels and a maximum width of 124. So now this is going to go all the way to 124 here. See if I increase the size and go up, see it goes more, but I'm going to keep it at 124. So now what we do is rather than adding it here, we can add it inside here. So actually, let me just copy this over from here to here, actually cut it out and paste it in here. So here, I can just set a normal font size, like 3.6 rem, okay? And now what's gonna happen is it's gonna increase its scale like this, but as soon as it hits this point, as soon as we get out of that max width, it's not gonna grow anymore. So that's pretty cool. We can limit, we can do a lock on top of it. So it stays the same height, but as soon as we get smaller, we are starting to create this fluid motion. All right, so there's a lot of options that you can do here. So obviously we're gonna take a look more at this when we start creating our project. And again, the benefit of having this is that it's still accessible. So we can still change the font size if we want. Settings, medium, very small, it's still gonna be affected. Very large, as you can see. So this still works, which is nice because we're using rems.